The bankruptcy of VShojo is inevitable. At this point, all signs are pointing to insolvency. So today we're going to go over the bankruptcy process and exactly what it's going to look like and how it's going to affect VShojo. Of course, as the Legal Minds, where we teach you to be your own judge. I'm Andrew Esquire, American attorney, and this is a fast facts, quick and dirty version of the legal education and news that gets best to you as quickly as possible. So smash a like and leave a comment if you like the fast facts versions. Now, getting into this, we've been covering the breakup of VShojo as has happened and been covered by many channels. But one thing that I've said quickly, and I think I was probably the first person to point this out, is that bankruptcy is the way that this is going to wind up. As we're seeing things play out, as people are speaking out, it's very clear looking at the roster, looking at the fact that there's literally no talent left. This is a list as of today. All of the red people are confirmed to have left. So Zentraya, Iron Mouse, Project Melody, Hime, Kason, Haruka, Henya, Giga, Kuro, Matara, Michi, everybody here, Hestia, Yutori, Okamoto, Amelie, everybody is essentially out. Then we've got people that left earlier, like Vebe, Silverbill, and Aminia. And then Fruit is the only one that's left that even is, not made an official announcement, but she's removed VShojo from her profile. So she's expected to leave. So at this point, they have absolutely no profit generation. There is no way that there's any income coming in. And at that point, for any company, you are insolvent. If you were already having problems when all of your creators were at their maximum revenue generation and you still were not profitable, there's no way to be profitable with no revenue coming in. It's a simple 1 + 1, and there really is no other way around that. Now, we're also seeing the scope of this debt, and even as of a while ago, this is not even totally current, but this is very recent here in 2025. You're seeing that they are about 2 million deep in loans and in what they owe to talent. $2 million. There's no digging out of that. There's no going in and asking for another loan to bail them out when they've got no one working for them. This is leading to insolvency. And what happens in insolvency? Well, naturally, it would be a bankruptcy. That is the natural thing for a company to do, particularly when they are buried by claims, when they're going to be buried by lawsuits, when they're going to be buried by obligations and unpaid wages. You're going to have to turn to bankruptcy. So what does the bankruptcy process actually look like? Many people are not familiar with it or only know it in a personal context. We're going to talk about it in a corporate context today. So what that actually looks like is either reorganization or liquidation. Now we're talking about personal bankruptcy. There's different chapters we're not talking about personal bankruptcy. We're talking about corporate bankruptcy. For personal bankruptcy, you might be familiar with that. There's also municipal bankruptcy, and there's other sorts of bankruptcies that are in the bankruptcy code. But in this specifically, there's two that would apply, either Chapter 7 or Chapter 11. And I'm going to explain the difference. The difference is really between reorganization or liquidation. Chapter 11 is reorganization. This is for companies that have a chance. So you're saying there's a chance of recovery and profitability. So if that company can get back to making money, then it can be reorganized. And you can say, hey, look, let's restructure this. Let's, change the terms of some debt. Let's, maybe trim some fat off the company, and let's get this thing going. However, Chapter 7 is for those that realistically cannot reorganize or return to profitability. Chapter 7 is way faster, cheaper, and handled in months versus years for Chapter 11. And in Chapter 7, a trustee takes over versus Chapter 11 with existing management. So looking at all these factors, it's very clear it's going to be Chapter 7. They're also a mainly service-oriented company. They don't have heavy in products or assets. And if you think about it, the only real assets, the big assets that a VTuber company would normally have are the models. And like it or not, at the end of the day, they are an asset. They could be sold to somebody to be skinwalked by some other person, right? And of course, the VTuber community would absolutely not accept that. That's deplorable in the general culture of the VTubing community. But technically, from a legal standpoint, it is an asset. Intellectual property right is an asset. So they could sell those assets, except for they don't own those assets. because the creators own their own IP, there really isn't much to sell. They probably don't own more than a couple of staplers and some desks. I mean, that's probably all they really have is some office stuff to liquidate, and that's probably about it. They probably got a lot of liabilities, but nothing to really offset that in significant assets. They weren't investing in real estate. They didn't have any heavy machinery. There's nothing that they could actually, turn over and sell, like a fleet of trucks or cars. So what we're seeing here is going to be Chapter 7. It's going to be a liquidation. There's no way they're going to want to put the existing management, which has been a failure for the past years, and we're talking years, they've been failing in profitability. They're not going to say, hey, you guys can totally turn this around. We're going to give you a chance. There's no chance of that. I think the judge is going to look at it as this and say, nope, it's definitely going to be Chapter 7. You guys are clearly down that lane. So let's go down the lane of Chapter 7. What's the process for that? So VShojo's got to submit a petition for bankruptcy. Now, we haven't seen this yet. As soon as this gets filed, I'm sure we're going to report in it. I'll report in it. I'll let you guys know. But we're going to see a submission of a petition for bankruptcy. When they submit that, they're going to also have to list all of their assets, liabilities, their income, expenditures, contracts, leases. And this is going to be very interesting because that's when we're going to get the truth. How deep in financial hot water was VShojo? That is going to be a spicy meatball that I think all the people in the VTM community, drama tubers and otherwise, everybody, right, is going to sink into and really analyze. And that's going to be an absolute bombshell to see exactly how bad they were performing over the past. And I think that's also instructive for future corporations to not have such ridiculous predictions for profitability. Now, what would happen is after they do that list, they submit all the petition, they're going to get it turned over to a bankruptcy trustee. So the bankruptcy trustee is going to take control of everything. They're going to take all the assets, and their job is to liquidate those assets and distribute them to creditors. So taking anything they have of worth and distributing it. But there's an order. At the top of the list are secured creditors. So anybody who has a secured loan or a mortgage, etc. And then there's unsecured. And that's everybody else, including people like talents. Now, I did mention there is an exemption which might give them as prospective independent contractors priority status over other claims. That might be possible. It may be possible they will cover some money. Maybe. However, it ain't going to be much. And it certainly won't be enough to satisfy all the obligations, particularly the massive charity obligation. So that's going to be something that's looming out there, and that's going to be something that the trustee is going to have to deal with. Now, another big question that people have asked is about NDAs. And I want to clarify this because I have said on certain media, et cetera, that yes, the NDAs are going to be, at some point, they're going to be able to speak up. They're going to be able to talk. But there's some legal distinction here. And I want to be very clear because this is something that is kind of a legal, not a gray area, but it's the difference between the law technically and the practical reality. So in the law, technically, a bankruptcy only discharges financial obligations, and an NDA is a non-financial obligation. So it's an obligation of confidentiality. So technically, an NDA is not gotten rid of by bankruptcy. Bankruptcy does not void NDAs in and of itself. However, it's practically either difficult or almost impossible to enforce NDAs afterwards. Certainly impracticable. Like you cannot actually, in reality and practice, go and enforce these things. Why? Well, first of all, the legal priority is given to satisfying the creditors, to satisfying the outstanding debts. It's not given to, hey, we're going to allow you all this funding. We're going to allow you to use all this money to go chase people down and enforce NDAs. That's not given a top priority on the list of things, particularly by the bankruptcy trustee. Further is just the lack of funds. They're not going to possess enough funds to enforce all these NDAs and go out and sue everybody and their mother. And everybody and their mother is actually not a just tongue-in-cheek statement. They literally made Silvervale's mother sign an NDA. We're going to talk about that on my next live. But those NDAs, they're not going to have the funds. It costs money. It's not free to go enforce those NDAs. Also, the last thing is, this is something the court can take into effect, is that it's an unfair benefit to the company, particularly given the company's track record. particularly given that the company was using the NDAs to silence people from speaking about legitimate workplace grievances. And I've already talked about the fact that certain law, like California law and other laws, may actually allow them to speak up on those NDAs, particularly as it relates to workplace grievances. That's completely separate from the bankruptcy process. So there may be ways for them, and there likely are ways for them to speak up about those NDAs despite the bankruptcy process, et cetera. But beyond that, it would be wholly unjust to allow VShojo, which essentially kept them from earning, kept them from making money for some of them up to a year, even more than a year. There's records of them not paying people back now and accounts of them not paying back in 2023, way back in the day. So they're not going to say, hey, look, we're going to allow you to keep, to silence these people in the fact that you screwed them out of money. You shafted them for multiple years and in a massive amount. I mean, we saw 2 million was that amount projected there. Let's say that half of that is loans and half of that is talent. Say it's 1 million in loans and 1 million in talent. That's just me spitballing and guessing. Yeah, that doesn't look good. That does not look good with that amount of outstanding debt. So I do think there's going to be a point at which practically they'll be able to speak out, they'll be able to talk up, and I will caution all of the talents to consult with their individual lawyers when their individual lawyer that is representing them, not me, but their lawyer representing them, tells them they can speak up. Do it, right? Do it. When their lawyer tells them do it. And I think that day will come sooner than later. So everyone, please be patient. Let the process play out. Let the legal process happen. The best thing you can do is to support your creators. And it's so lovely that we had Iron Mouse breaking records. She's going to get to probably 1 million on her IDF fundraiser on Tilify. Absolutely great. That thing shot up overnight. And we're seeing some silver lining to a very bad situation. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll catch you on the next.